There, I'm Dr. Deborah Lukovich, and I'm excited to share my personal experience of how journaling and dreams helped me navigate a 10-year transformative period in my life. I sort of got tricked into pursuing a master's PhD in depth psychology, not knowing that it was a prompting, an inciting incident to my life falling apart, and it became my guide. Carl Jung actually became my spiritual advisor. So, it all started in 2013 when I journaled, I can't live this way anymore. And now my Word document is 2,000 pages long. And I love that it's in a Word document because I can go back and search for things and patterns. So if I look back at my midlife unraveling and reconstruction, I really can pinpoint sort of four dreams that represent two phases of this part of my life. And it all started with attending a dream tending conference hosted by Dr. Stephen Eisenstadt, facilitated by him. Here's his book at Pacifica Graduate Institute. And I laughed when he said, when you go to bed tonight, ask your psyche to bring you a recurring dream that you're curious about. And I had been having one, I think maybe over 7 years. And it was the one where you're being chased by armed mercenaries through your childhood home. I think I'm not the only one who has had that. And sure enough, in the morning, it had come to me, but it was different this time. My son was in it. I think my son was in middle school at the time. And so as I was running through my sister's red carpeted room and wanting to crawl out the window, I noticed my son in bed. And I said, "Oh my gosh, we got to get out of here. Come on." And he said, "Mom, go ahead. It'll be okay." And so that was interesting. So, with my partner using active imagination, I slipped into what I thought was the end of the dream because I was afraid of this dream. It was terrifying being chased by mercenaries. And she just asked me questions. And it was interesting that where I slipped in, I was in the garage of our house, childhood home. And I opened the door and I could see this dark figure sitting in the living room. And I was afraid, but I opened the door because he seemed harmless and wasn't looking at me. And as I walked towards him, my dream tending partner was asking me questions. And I got closer and closer and saw that it actually wasn't a solid person. It was like this shadowy figure. And she asked me what I noticed about him. He was wearing a top hat. And for some reason, that made me think of Frank Sinatra, who is my former husband's favorite singer. And I thought, so that reminds me of my husband at the time. And I got closer and closer, and it just stood there, sat there. And I ended up sitting down into the shadow. And the most striking part of that dream was that I felt nothing. So my initial meaning was, okay, mercenaries probably represent something I'm afraid to face in myself. And this was true in hindsight, a deep, dark secret I had for myself. And over time, it came to have even more meaning. And later on, the shit hit the fan, as they say. Things fell apart, and I did find the courage to choose me and my relationship, and also set my husband free from my expectations. And as I continued to journal about it, I found more meaning. And it came to me, I thought, I wonder if he felt the same way, but didn't have the courage to tell me. So I had to break his heart instead of him breaking my heart. So that was my first experience. After that, I started learning Jungian theory, of course, and Robert Johnson, his book Inner Work, gave me a framework for finding meaning and exploring my images. So I would say the second dream in this first part of my falling apart had to do with um, I had gotten divorced, I had started dating, I was sort of on top of my life and feeling good and confident, reconnecting with my body and my sexuality. And I got swept up with a much younger man in this love affair. And it was really archetypal. And I had to give myself permission to feel silly and awkward and vulnerable. And no matter what anybody else thought about this crazy relationship, which turned out to be very ironic as well, and brought up all other kinds of issues, I had this dream and it was an embodied dream. So I hadn't really known what an embodied dream was, but it stayed with me for months. And so in the dream, I'm in a bathroom, like in a state park. It's cement, concrete, and it's pitch dark. And I'm done going to the bathroom. So the dream isn't about going to the bathroom, but it's about trying to get out of the bathroom. And it's so dark, I can't see my way out. And it took me a little while to realize that in that dream, in order to get out, I had to feel my way out instead of using my head and my mind. So I put my hands out in front of me and I scraped my feet on that concrete floor. And eventually I found my way to the door. And suddenly I was falling backwards down a hill in the dark. Again, it's that kind of dark where no matter how wide you open your eyes in the middle of the night, you can't see. There's no adjustment. You can see nothing. And oddly, I was falling backwards slowly and I could sense that it was fall weather. And I stopped. And then I started tumbling backwards even more. And now I could sense that there was this breeze that was sort of cradling me. And as I was falling down, I had this sense that I felt safe in a way that I had never felt in my literal life, never felt truly safe. And when I woke up, I lingered in this feeling of safety. Now, I did something else besides journal. I drew it. I drew the image. And something about my unconscious caused me to add a pair of hands at the bottom of the drawing. And so I drew me falling down this hill with leaves and the wind and drew these hands. And it was something transcendent that made me feel like I was safe, that I got this. Well, the meaning of that dream, that day, I was actually going hiking with my new lover at a state park, oddly. And that during our hike was the first time that I felt insecure. I was just having fun. And now suddenly, like I cared and I was feeling insecure. And I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I noticed that this feeling of insecurity. So it took me time to find meaning in this dream. And over time, and I have come to believe that you don't necessarily even have to find the meaning of a dream in order for it to be doing something in your unconscious. So for me, part of the meaning of this dream is that I could slip back into that feeling of safety anytime I wanted until I couldn't anymore, like 3 months later. And also that dream, I identified that I was beginning to connect with something other than the literal me, whether it was my self, capital S, or this divine presence. And I really do like the notion of that our self is the bridge to the collective and to our unconscious. So I could access that. So that was part of the meaning as well. And in the end, really what it came to mean was that I was going to be okay. So I didn't know that because I didn't know what was up ahead of me, but myself knew what my journey was going to be and what this ironic love affair was going to bring to the surface for me to have to work out and reconcile. But I think if I hadn't had that dream, I might not have said yes to that ironic relationship. And I might not have actually followed through when certain red flags started occurring, where other people would have been like, what are you doing? And very odd things ended up happening. And it was those difficulties that ended up transforming me, making me reconcile things, and eventually unleashing. And that wouldn't have happened. And so I really do think like that dream was preparing me and was giving me this inner sense of security that I don't care how silly you feel, you're going to follow through because it's going to be worth it. So that's like the first phase. And of course, like I said, I have 2,000 pages of journaling now, and I kept journaling, but those two dreams are really pivotal. All right. So picking up from these first two pivotal dreams, that number one gave me the courage to sort of choose me and end this relationship and come into relationship with me again after 24 years of marriage. Also, knowing that I would be safe in whatever this ironic relationship was, what was in store for me that I didn't know. And then this thing happened in this relationship. And this gets to another pivotal dream, which really maybe is a fantasy. So I was with my lover and we were napping in my bed. And he was napping, but I was laying on top of him. And the sort of in kind of in a lower level of consciousness, I imagined him, and the image of him between my legs pleasuring me came up. And that was cool. That was enjoyable. But then something happened that really challenged me. His head transformed into a serpent, and the serpent wanted to enter me. And at first I constricted and I felt silly. And my mind was like, oh my gosh, this is so wrong. It was being literal. But I remembered, I knew enough now about Jungian theory to know that this is a symbol of something. And so I allowed in my imagination, which I think is like a dream, I allowed the serpent to enter me. And I ended up touching something really deep inside. And for me, the meaning that I gave to it was that I touched an ancient feminine. And for me, part of my midlife unraveling was to reconcile sexuality and spirituality. And I had an overdeveloped sense of masculine. So coming back into relationship with the feminine was part of my journey. So I journaled and looked up the meaning of the serpent and the snake, and it's a symbol for goddess before there was a word for goddess. And I had all sorts of associations that had to do with that. So for me, as I explored that in my journaling, it just came to mean that I surrendered. And at the time, my lover had a conflict having sex outside of marriage. So I was meandering into the space of what I call no sex sex, which is an amazing experience of slowing down and becoming intimate in a different way with yourself. So then there was another period of time. And with this relationship, there was a pause in the relationship, and there was a climax in the relationship. And suddenly my fantasy of this relationship was sort of crashing, and old memories of over adapting to my former husband were coming back. And I had a flurry of dreams with the phallic symbol. And I drew a lot of those. And there was either the symbol transitioned and evolved. And I think this is another component of exploring dreams, is that the same symbol will change over time. And so the phallic symbol in the earlier dreams was attached to a man, and then it wasn't attached to anyone. And then eventually I had my own phallic symbol. And in the dream, I could kiss it and I loved it and I could make it come. And the last dream of that series combined, I was suffering from menopausal hot flashes, and I had anger about I didn't know this relationship was going to end. And at the same time, I had finished the dissertation or I was working on research for my PhD, which was exploring women's relationship and experience of reconciling sexuality and spirituality. So there was a lot going on in me. And after those series of dreams and waking up with this anger phallic symbol that I had of my own, I decided to draw the image. And it's actually in the back of one of my books, and it's called Womb on Fire. And I just drew my womb and flames and a phallic symbol going in. And I wrote feminine phallus and creativity and anger and mad woman. And what happened is that I had just a couple of weeks ago submitted a proposal to do a workshop to speak to people about healing this wound, patriarchal wound that men and women both carry. And I didn't know what I was going to write, but I got accepted. And so that unleashing that anger and beginning to understand that me, my creativity, my new self had nothing to do with this literal person. I literally wrote that whole proposal then, like the next day. And so that is and then that relationship ended. So those are sort of two specific phases in my midlife unraveling and reconstruction. And then there's more that happens after that, like a 3-act play, right? So you've got this inciting incident and progressive complications, and then you have this mirror moment. And so this represents my mirror moment where I'm like, no to the relationship. This is about me and unleashing my creativity. And then Act 3, you don't know about yet. So those are 4 significant dreams, fantasies, journaling, active imagination that I hope bring to light this theory for you and help you actually develop a practice of finding meaning in your own dreams and also with your clients. So thanks for letting me share. I could talk about this all day long. So thanks.